Good morning and welcome. Thank you for attending our Ask the Expert session on cyber insurance. So first of all, we're very privileged to be joined by Simon from Maximity, IT expert and who works alongside us. So he's going to do a talk on cyber threats, perils, and just where the attacks are coming from, etc. After that, we will then have a question and answer session, and also a session from our Managing Director, Peter Robinson, which will detail the protection that we can offer, the policies that we have available to us. So less of my rabbling anyway, and now on to Simon.
So your guide to cyber, and I'll try and keep this as high level as I can, but it's really important for us to grasp what cyber's all about and why should we care. I think that this understanding that companies and individuals are actually being targeted with some really challenging consequences, and this can be from large gangs. There was a Russian gang in 2015 that stole £20 million from banks across the world, and things like that are happening regularly, as you'll see throughout this this presentation. Ransomware attacks are really challenging because what they do is they corrupt all of your data, so you can't use anything. You can't use anything on your computers, anything on your servers. You can't function as a business because the ransomware stops you doing that unless you pay the ransom, and that really cripples companies. And you've got then major decisions to wrestle with as to how you approach that attack if it hits you. And we'll talk a little bit later about some experiences there. There are in the region of 4,000 ransomware attacks every day. So today there will be 4,000 attacks involving ransomware, and whilst all of those won't get through, those that do get through really cripple people's lives. If you have invoices that you receive or that you send that are intercepted, that can affect your payments. So if they change the bank details on your invoice, experiences where people read the invoice, pick up the bank details, make a payment, but those bank details have been changed on the invoice because people have intercepted those invoices. I think one of the things that is challenging about cyber is that you don't usually know that you've been attacked. So in that example of the Russian gang, they were in the bank systems around the world for about 6 months, I think it was. They were looking at all of the video cameras in those banks. They had access to passwords. They had access to everything within those organizations, and no one knew. And in fact, the only way that they discovered it was because they accidentally set off a cash point machine churning out cash when the person who was supposed to be there with a bag wasn't. And so all this cash started spooling onto the street, and that was the first time that the bank realized that they'd been compromised. So that understanding of, it's almost 6 months that people are in your network before you know. So it's quite challenging to understand and to get your head around those things. This is sophisticated, automated, and targeted. So this isn't sort of your sort of spotty schoolboy in his bedroom having a go because he can. And there are those situations. There are lots of individuals who just do this because it's fun, because they can. But there is a lot of money in this, and there are gangs all over the world that are involved in these things, and it's very difficult to understand who they are, where they are, and to tackle this. Just to give some sense of that, in 2016, this cost the world economy more than £341 billion. And that just takes a little bit of absorbing and taking in, because that's just a lot of money. The Internet of Things is basically things like your smart TVs, your smart speakers, lots of toys, wearables, all these sorts of things. And a lot of those things can be attacked within 2 minutes. And it's worth just, again, understanding some of these things, that how we expose ourselves to cyber. As a business, clearly, if you find yourselves in a point where you can't invoice, where you don't know what's in your bank, or you can't reconcile it, or you don't know what orders you've got, you don't know what your stock situation is, without that information, and this is what ransomware can do, it can literally stop you getting at any of those things. You cannot function. You're not going to be able to move forward. You're not going to be able to support your customers. You won't be able to get stock from your suppliers because you won't know what's going on, and so you're going to have to start again, which a massive impact for people. Also, data breaches, and there's been a lot of this in the news recently about GDPR came in a few years ago, and if you lose data that is GDPR compliant, you've got to be very public about that, but also you've got your own designs, your own information about your designs for things in your company. You don't want those things stolen. They're your IP. You've got to protect those things in the right way. Something that I hear a lot when I talk to business leaders is, yeah, this is all a bit complicated and I don't really understand these things. And that is a really challenging phrase to hear, because we're not immune to this. And as individuals we're not, but as businesses we're not. So there is so much of this going on. It is more a case of, when will this happen to me, rather than will it happen to me. It's also important to know that if you've not done something, or it has been through your negligence, then in terms of refunding monies, banks won't. So if it's your responsibility to ensure that you're in the right place. And when people find themselves in this situation, it's very challenging for them. So we had a client, because of this, came to us because they'd had a computer in their reception that wasn't always manned, it wasn't locked, and they got malware got into their systems, and they lost £80,000 in that process. And the bank actually viewed what had gone on there as an inside job, because in fact how that malware got in and how they collected the information, it was too obvious. Also, another client that had changed their payment interface, but they hadn't ported all the data across. And I thought, it's okay, we'll take it from the invoices. And they did take all the payment information from the invoices, but one of the invoices had been hacked into, and they didn't realize this, and the bank details and sort code had been changed. Now, actually, as it happened in that instance, Santander saw the payment. It was for a large amount of money, and they checked it, and that was how they discovered that change had been made, and that risk had occurred. Just of interest, one of the providers of protection has a visual view of what's going on right now, and I thought this was quite interesting to share. It's Kaspersky. I'm not selling them, but I just like this visual because it tells you that right now, here are all of the attacks that are going on across the world that is related to them. And I think it just gives us quite an insight into what is happening right this moment in relation to cyber. So anyone can go to that and have a look at that map in their own time. But just to give you a sense of this is real, this is tangible. So what is cyber? What does it cover? First off, we have ransomware. I've talked about that. There are some big names out there in terms of WannaCry and Petya that were very in the public domain, but this is happening all the time to large and small businesses. There's the whole bit of social engineering, which is about looking at social media platforms, people gathering information about you and targeting you in that way. So putting bits of information like, photographs of where you might be, etc. And there's a lot of effort goes into this, and gangs pay people to give them this information. You've got a lot of different terminologies just coming up. So phishing is where you get emails from what are reputable companies, and that is basically they're not the real company, of course. It's just it's a fictitious email. So that's one way. You've got spear phishing, where they use your known contacts. So it might be your boss. You'll get an email from what looks like your boss saying, do this, click on this link, do etc. You've got smishing, which is from texts. I've had a few of those recently. So there's been a lot of activity in this area during the lockdown. I don't know why that's spurred people on, but I had a text saying that you haven't paid your O2 bill. Well, click on this link. Well, actually, I'm not with O2, etc. So things like that occurring, and then we get into malware. And malware is software that sits in your system and it collects information. So it could be your passwords as you're typing them. It could be just trawling your data and sharing that. And there's lots of different ways of doing this. So you've got adware, you've got spyware, you've got Trojan horses. All these are they're kind of all similar types of infection that you can get in your system that's basically sat in your computers, sending information back to the gangs. And of course, viruses we're very familiar with. The last one is Dolphin, which is interesting. They worked out that things like Siri and Google could hear a pitch above the human hearing, and so they could communicate with your Siri or your Google using this really high frequency connectivity. So you're blissfully unaware that people are connecting with you. And why do they do this? There's just because there's a lot of money in this, but there are also some very sinister beyond the financial. So frauds is a big one, but child grooming, there's just a lot of this about. And recently saw some information that they're talking about children as young as 8 being groomed on the likes of TikTok. So being aware of what your kids are doing and the vulnerability of all of that as well. Surveillance, I'm not knocking Alexa, I've got Alexa myself, but being aware that that people can see and hear what's going on. If you've got cameras, if you've got Alexa and other such technology. Financial theft, as we've talked about, again, some big numbers very quickly with some of these issues that are going on. Espionage, a lot of that between companies as well. We kind of think of espionage in terms of between countries, but in fact, there's a lot of espionage that takes place between companies with people trying to get your information, your IP, and copy it. Theft, just basic theft, as we've talked about, and cyber warfare, which kind of goes into the whole drones with weapons area. And of course, that's okay if it's your own. I say it's okay. If it's your own army doing that, you kind of feel safe that they are in control of it. But actually, these things very quickly become outside of what you'd call a controlled environment. So there's a number of different things going on with cyber that affect all of us in many different ways. So how can this happen to us? Well, one of the things is through unsecured Wi-Fi, and you'd be surprised to hear that people actually do sit in coffee shops and they set up on their mobile phone a Wi-Fi hotspot, and they call it something genuine that looks very official, and people go into the coffee shop and they'll get onto their laptops and they'll link with the Wi-Fi thinking it's all safe, and in fact then everything they're keying from that time on is captured by by these people, and it's very easy to do and very easy to fall into that trap. So being aware of what you're connecting to and making sure that you're selecting all the right options around that is really important. We've talked a little bit about this around documents such as invoices and the interception of that. And a lot of us have had people that we know who've had their emails attacked, and you suddenly get a load of spurious emails through, you know, telling you that they're trapped in an island somewhere and they need lots of money urgently and all of this good stuff. So protecting your email account is just so important, and we'll talk a little bit about how you do that. But the effects of not protecting your email can be massive. So we can get links coming through from email from what is perceived to be our boss. We can receive documents in emails, or likewise we can be pointed to documents in shared services, such as you know, whether it be Google Docs or whatever. You've got to be careful with these things to make sure that they don't have things embedded in them that are going to cause you challenges. So always think about, do you know the person that sent that email? Are you confident that document is secure? And people are trying to hack your accounts all the time, and they target the obvious places. So a lot of people use Microsoft and Office because they're a good tool set, but know that those accounts within Microsoft are a key target area for hackers, because they know that a lot of people use them, a lot of large organizations use them. So making sure that your environment is safe is really important, because those accounts are being targeted all the time. USB sticks, so we talk about computers in reception areas and people being able to just, it takes no time at all just to walk up to a computer that is still logged in and stick your USB stick in, and then you've infected that computer with your malware or whatever. Be really careful if someone gives you a USB stick. Make sure that you virus check it and that you are confident in what's on that stick. It's just such an easy way to transmit these things. Website links, as we know, hopefully we're familiar with that, but as you're going through websites, do check that the websites are genuine. Do check the links and be confident in where you're going. It's always important to do your research, particularly if you're purchasing stuff, but any links in websites, ensuring that you're confident in those links. Stolen laptops is a biggie as well. When you get a laptop, they're not as hard to hack into as you might think. So keeping information on your laptops, making sure that you've got the right security, and also making sure that you're physically doing the right thing with your laptops and not leaving them in your cars, etc. It's just minimizing that exposure that we so easily have in our business lives, and we're all busy, aren't we? So some of these things are really an inconvenience, but we can't afford them to be, because the impact can be so significant. And software downloads, again, is a big one, particularly for Trojan horses, malware, that type of thing. So when you're downloading software from the internet, again, making sure that you're downloading it from a source you trust, and making sure that you've got right virus protection, etc., to ensure that you're not infecting your own computer. It's just worth, when we talk about infecting our own computer, if I'm on a laptop or a desktop and I get an infection, I am more than likely to be connected to my computer network, and therefore it's not just me I'm infecting. That can spread around the organization very quickly. And again, as I said right at the beginning, so often we're just not aware that these things have landed. So if they're sitting there for 6 months without actually taking money from you, without actually attacking you, they just sat there for 6 months waiting for the right moment to then take as much from you as they can. All these things contribute to that risk. The other thing that's interesting is mobile phones. So as I said earlier, you know, I had this O2 message come through. I've also had Santander saying that we noticed an unusual login. Click here to give me your details. Well, I don't bank with Santander, as it happens, and so that was clearly an attack through mobile phones. And those things can be so innocent, because you just get a text through, and I think, oh no, I need to make sure that's okay. And so you've got to be careful in all the devices that you are using. One of the things that continues to amaze me is the number of organizations that still run old software. So old versions of Word and PowerPoint and these other things. And why do we care about that? Well, it's because all the time these upgrades to these software are filling gaps that exist to enable hackers in. And so macros can exist within most document types, and in the old software, when they knew less about the whole cyber environment, there were doors that could be opened through those documents. And all the time, Microsoft and other organizations are releasing new versions that protect us more and more against cyber. So staying on old versions of Windows, old versions of Office, you are exposing yourself just by doing that. And the same goes for all of your mainstream applications as well. You just need to know that you are secure, and to do that, you need to be on the latest software. Social media, I've talked about quite a bit already. It never ceases to amaze me, really, how effective hacking can be in this environment. Less so against businesses, but again, if you're using the same password, for example, in your business as you are in your home life, then you are exposing the business as well as yourself personally. So you shouldn't do that. You should really separate out some of your home life passwords from your business passwords. Keep a really clear line between those things, because social media can expose you. People can learn a lot about you and about your kids. So if you've got kids using social media, don't be ignorant to it. Be aware and educate them as well. Because a lot of these, you know, Snapchat, the information around that that's accessible, there's software out there that can enable people to see locations, to see even texts in some of these applications, and people need to be aware of that, because it leads criminals to target people because they sense their vulnerability, etc. Again, link to that picture location tag. So if you're sharing pictures on the internet, you know, remove location tags, etc., or just be aware that they exist, and that sharing those pictures, you are exposing yourself there somewhat. And things like fitness apps, you know, again, that track your where did you go for a run? You know, are you by tracking that exposing yourself? You know, particularly for those of us who are more vulnerable. And if I'm out on my own running and I'm vulnerable and I'm telling people where I'm running, all of that stuff, it's all relevant, and you should just be aware of it and protect yourself appropriately. So very quickly, from a tech point of view, I just encourage you to make sure you're talking to the right people in relevance to your technology. So your MSP should really be helping you with this, or your internal IT team should be guiding you and taking you over. If you're not doing these things, it's like jumping into the sea when you know you can't swim, because this is the first step in your defense. So very quickly, firewalls just protect who can get into your organization systems. Antivirus, anti-malware, anti-exploit, spam filtering, these are all things that protect you from the things I've been talking about in the last half hour. user access and making sure who can get in, who's got the right tools, the right access to your environment. If you're not doing these things, like I say, then you're just exposing yourself unnecessarily as a business. And finally, patching. And I've talked about software updating, but patching is keeping your software up to date, and it's really critical. If you're not up to date, you are exposed to everything I've talked about. But having your IT right is only one aspect, because you can have all of that stuff in place and still be exposed. And wherever you can, getting people in the way of technology is the right answer. So what I mean by that is putting people in as a step in anybody's access to your organization. So the first obvious one is two-factor authentication. And what that means is that rather than just signing in with your password, you actually sign in with your password, and it then sends you a text, or you can use two-factor authentication software on your phone that says, are you sure this is you? Put in this code. And so you've got a second set of authentication going on. That puts a human being in between a hacker who might be able to get your password, but then can't pretend to be you on a mobile phone reading your text. So putting these things in place, they're available in almost every system that you can talk about, really essential to do that. And what leads into that then is proper passwords. So again, I talked about this earlier, that Microsoft was particularly being targeted at the moment. People are trying all of the standard passwords, and this isn't people keying them in manually. They've got systems that are running constantly trying to hack into this. Use proper passwords. Use something that is complex, that is not a word, but and not something that someone therefore could guess. I'd suggest that you want it to be 8 and 10 characters long. You want to use alternative symbols in that password. You want to use capitals, and you want to use numbers. So as much as possible, getting your passwords right. Also, there's a kind of a cultural thing here as well, because if I get an email from my boss, and my boss is someone who's not open to me knocking on the door and saying, excuse me, did you actually send this? I've again heard of people where this happens, and people get an email through that they think is strange, but they just don't have a culture of it being okay to check. And so fostering that culture in your organization that says, look guys, this can happen. And within our own organization, we've had it where you get emails from what pertains to be your boss saying, please do this. Culture of ask before you click and before you understand it. Really important. Don't just click links into that. So training your staff. So this whole bit about I'm not really aware of this stuff, actually you can't afford, if you're a business leader, you cannot afford to not be aware of all the things I've just said. And you can't afford for your staff to not be aware, because they're all going to be receiving these emails, and they're all potentially going to click on that link that can put that malware, or worse still, the ransomware onto your environment, and then you are in a world of pain. So don't be ignorant, train people, get them up to speed, get people aware of social media and the do's and don'ts around that. As I said before, separate work and home, so that if someone hacks into your work account, they haven't then got natural access to your other account. And also think about your suppliers and your customers. So what are they doing to protect themselves? So, we can talk about our own protection, but if we've got key suppliers that we're interacting with all the time, you want to know that they are secure as well, because you don't want them sending you stuff that you shouldn't be clicking on or opening. So it's kind of a holistic view, but making people part of the process is absolutely critical. I mean, not having the IT, that's just daft, but then not training people and not having awareness of this stuff, that is the real crime, because it is people that is going to stop this happening, not really your IT. And it'll never happen to us. You know, we had a new client come to us because they'd had a ransomware attack. The ransom was £10,000. This was a small business, and they hadn't got £10,000 or didn't want to give the £10,000 away. And even if you pay the 10,000, you have no idea that they're not going to attack you again in a few months' time. They've already got the into your organisation. And so they had to rebuild their systems from scratch. And that just took an age. And it's really important for us to reflect on things like that. If this stuff happens to you, what would you do? If you came in this morning and you couldn't actually access your systems, your email, your orders, what would you do? And would you pay? Would you rebuild? What's your impact on all of your staff? What they can do today, what they can do next week, what they can do next month? These are chilling times when these things happen to organisations, and you know, this was just prior to Christmas. Must have been just awful for them to have to face into those challenges. And there are also consequences beyond that. So, you know, there's been a lot in the papers recently about people being attacked and information taken from them. So large organizations that have had their data stolen, and this is contact data, which really sits right into the GDPR space. And, you know, the fines can be huge. They can be really huge, and you don't want to be there. And that whole bit, as we just said in the previous slide, about how long can you last if you can't function, and then you've got your whole reputation as well, because you can't help but your customers know that you can't function anymore, or that you've had a big fine, and that's had a big blow on what you can then service and manage. So we have to be aware, we have to be cautious, and we have to do the right things to ensure that we are protecting ourselves and our businesses. You know, the recovery plan, we talk a lot about business recovery in business, don't we? So what would we do if these things happen? Well, the first challenge is you need to know it's happened. You know, the banks around the world for 6 months didn't know that they'd been compromised. We do need to take effective backups, and again, it comes back to our MSPs, our IT support, or our IT functions, to ensure that we've got ourselves covered in the right way in these areas. So getting that strong IT support and knowing how we're going to come out of this should it happen. And it's worth even spending a bit of time walking through that scenario. If we get attacked today, talking with your IT department, what would we do? What would happen? How would we overcome it? Making sure that you've got the right policies in place around phone, around PCs. Am I allowed to put my PC in the car? No. Am I allowed to, etc., etc. Put this on my phone, etc. All of those policies and things, IT needs to help you with those and make sure that you've got the right things in place. And of course, you know, it would be wrong of me not to mention insurance, because when these things happen, you know, you can do all the things I've talked about. You can have the right IT in place, and you can have the right people training in place, and you can still get caught out, because it just takes one click. You know, it's so easy to fall foul of this. I didn't mention earlier, I should have mentioned this in the people bit as well, that these organizations actually use people and send them into your organization to try and get your information. So it's not even just a technology view to get that, to get those login details, or get into your system, or put that USB stick in. You know, that there's a lot of organizations out there that are set up now and geared up to help test this for you, and they do all of the IT checks and tests, but they also send people into your organization pertaining to be from your organization needing help, and can you just log me in, can you just get me to this, I need to get this report submitted. whatever it might be, and in the process then they just stick a USB stick in and it's all over. So insuring yourself, because there's just so many possibilities and opportunities to get caught out by this. You need to do all the things I've talked about. You need to protect yourself, but also the risk is clear and present. That was me. My name's Simon. I work for Maximity. We do training and IT support and consultancy, and it's been great to talk to you guys today.
Thank you for that, Simon. That was a fantastic presentation. So very informative and equally scary. So I'm glad as a business we have as you'd expect as an insurance broker, very robust cyber liability policy. So before I go on to Peter though, I should mention that any questions and answers can be submitted via the question and answers section of this. So they can be either to myself, Peter, or Simon. So again, IT, security or insurance related, and we'll read those out and answer them at the end. So next, Peter will tell you about the cyber insurance policies available.
As you'd expect, we do cyber insurance, but the thing is, there's about 40 different types of cyber insurance policy out there. It's not like car insurance where you know what you're buying. Every single cyber insurance policy is different, and that's why you need somebody like us with grey hairs to sort of talk you through the whole process, because it can be as simple as just somebody clicking on the wrong thing, as Simon said. I mean, there was a big claim by Hiscox a few years ago, the Hiscox had rather, and it was an opticians in Oxford, small business, and a woman on the reception counter had an email in saying that she'd been caught by a speed camera. Click on the link to see details. She clicked on the link, nothing happened for months. And then ransomware infected the entire system. And it cost Hiscox 70 grand to not only get the fine sorted, but the trouble is, although they paid the fine in that case, it had completely buggered the systems. So what they had to do then was just rebuild the systems, and that took months. And of course, all lost business as well. And they had to tell all their customers that, oh, sorry, our systems have been compromised and we're down. So it can affect anybody all the time. The biggest problem with cyber, as they used to say about driving school, is the nut behind the wheel. It's the person in charge of the keyboard. All they need is them to click one thing and your systems are down. That's why you need bloody robust training there. And in case it goes wrong, insurance policies. Now, the sort of insurance policy you can get, there's three basic types. And as you'd expect, we've got all three, because if my systems go down, let's say Simon rang me up to change his car insurance, not that we insure Simon's car, subtle hint, but we don't. But say Simon rang up to insure his car, and we said, sorry, sir, we can't, our systems are down. What does he do then? Does he go somewhere else? Does he drive a car when insured? Whatever happens is a worst case scenario for us as a business. He will certainly lose faith in us as a business, and chances are, even if he does find a way to drive his car whilst we're trying to get our systems sorted, come renewal date, he'll probably go elsewhere because he couldn't trust us when he needed us. So this is why we need good policy. And what we've got a combination of two policies. We've got a policy which covers a lump sum, which provides a lump sum in the event of a cyber breach and a failure of essential online services, and also a policy which gives full support in the event of a cyber breach, including IT, forensic, marketing, and legal services, plus cover for online scamming and fraud. Now, that sounds possibly a little bit expensive. It's not that bad. I mean, our business turns over about £5 million a year, and we probably spend a couple of grand a year on cyber insurance. So it's not a big cost and expense. Cyber policies start about 100 quid a year. They can go a lot more than that. And I think the biggest policy we've got is over £25,000, but that's for a big company in the city. So you can pay a lot of money for cyber, or you can pay a small amount, depends on the amount of cover you want. And that's obviously our job as brokers. To sort of, if you came to us and said, I want some cyber insurance, we'd ask a few pertinent questions and then give you a selection of options, because one size doesn't always fit all. And yeah, Matt, back to you again. I think I've summed that one up quite well enough.
So, Julie, have you got any questions that we can go start?
Yeah, we have got a couple. I think Pete basically covered the how much does cyber insurance cost, so hopefully that's covered it enough for people. Can a private individual buy cyber insurance?
Matt, do you want to run with this, or shall I?
You can, Peter. Yeah.
Okay, yes, there is a lot of the high net worth policies, the top end for people, your average millionaire, etc., do include an element of cyber cover. But for normal people like us, no, household policies do not cover cyber insurance. So you can buy a separate standalone policy which covers you against all the things you'd expect to cover you for. It costs, I think, About 50 quid a year, Matt, is that about right?
Sounds about right, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and it is available as a standalone policy. So yeah, we can do that. And again, if you'd like more details, we can send you full details across. Just drop us a line.
Yeah, and it covers things like cyberbullying against kids, doesn't it? Which is
Yeah, it does.
quite good. So
And also, I mean, one of our members of staff had a situation where one of her children actually sort of clicked and bought things they shouldn't have done, and they're victim of cyber scamming. So hey presto, the policy operated for that as well.
Okay, we've got another one. Are charities vulnerable to being attacked?
Guys, Matt, sorry.
they're as vulnerable as everyone else. So yes, they'll get targeted in the same way that any other business or organisation would. So, and they probably won't have as advanced IT systems in place because of the funding or amount of funding they've got. So yes, there still are.
Can you insure against an ICO fine?
Yes and no. Technically, fines are not insurable, but what you can do, you can buy a policy which we've purchased for ourselves, which in the event of an ICO breach pays out a lump sum. Now you can pay that, you can use that to upgrade your systems, or you could use it to mitigate any sort of fine. Fines themselves are not technically insurable, but you can get a sum of money which you might be used for that purpose as well.
Does insurance cover if your supplier gets hacked?
They can. It depends very much on the policy, and the cover got several policies have extensions that if you have a disruption to your revenue or you are hacked because of a supplier. So if one of your supplier systems goes down, which then leads you to have financial loss, you can insure for that. Also, if you get system outages. But again, it depends how complex the insurance policy is. It is available, but yeah, the basic policy will have a very small amount. But if you need to use outsources a lot, then yes, we can get that. But it does tend to cost a little bit more money than a normal policy.
How can I be sure the cyber policy I have is appropriate? How do I know I can claim on the policy? As having a cyber policy and being able to claim on it could be two different things. How do I know I'm covered for all eventualities?
But that would be talking to a professional to talk about what you are worried about and what each different policy gives. So if there's certain elements of the cyber threat that you are concerned about, and then you want to make sure that policy responds to that, then you need to talk to an expert who'll be able to go through the small print, the different sections of cover with you, and then talk about the terms and conditions you'll have to comply with.
Okay, we've got another one here that is slightly, it might be for Simon actually. One of this lady's team has had her daughter's social media account hacked and pornographic images have been shared on her sites. The daughter's now on antidepressants and they know who's doing it. They've advised to go to the police, but what other advice can we give?
So I think as much as possible, so changing your passwords, whatever it is on, if you know you've been hacked in your email, in your social media, in any of those areas, change your passwords as the first step, because the reason they can access those things is because they've got your account. And also, folks, and I know I've said separate out work from business, but also from home, but also not using the same password across multiple applications is also critical, because if you're using, for example, the same password in Facebook and and other social media platforms, then once they get one, then they get all the others. So I think change your passwords is the first thing. Just make sure that no one can do that. I would encourage, probably, and again, I'm not a psychologist, but I would think that actually coming off social media, at least for a time, would be a good start as well. There are organisations out there that can support, and we can put some links in the chat afterwards where you can get help and support for this sort of thing, for victim support. But the police are very good and would give you good advice as well on how to handle it.
Thank you. We've also got one which I think might be for a lot of people actually. There's a lot of people that are not tech savvy. Maybe they haven't got the support of a big company behind them. Would the cover still be be enforced if they hadn't covered everything they're supposed to, not through their lack of trying, it's just that their knowledge, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just answer this one. I mean, there are a few policies out there which stipulate you've got to have firewalls and up-to-date antivirus, but a bulk of the policies do not lay that requirement down. So again, if you think that's a problem, just talk to us as your brokers, or we can find a policy which hasn't got those requirements built in. We had an inquiry from an accountant recently who wanted cyber insurance cover. So I sent her a quote across, but she was concerned she didn't comply with the requirements. So I just found an alternative policy. It was about 50 quid a year more, but it hadn't got all the small print in there she was worried about. So answers are available, and you can get solutions for this. You just don't be ignorant. Ask the question, and then leave it up to us to sort the solution for you. As simple as the Mayor says.
Jules, just to go back to the previous question, which just one other thought for this this lady with a daughter, block the person they think's doing it from all of their social media accounts. So if they say they think they know who's doing it, then I think they just need to get on and block that person from those accounts, so they can't continue to post those images.
Okay. Is there an easy way to check if I'm living up to my policy's requirements to make a claim? So meeting terms of the policy that I may not have read or understood.
Okay. The only way to do that really is to check the documents. So it'd be looking at the application you had to complete at the start with statement of fact or proposal form, what was disclosed on that and whether that's still correct. And then any conditions on the policy schedule and the policy wording, any conditions precedent on there. So that'll be the way to do it. So just reading through them or talk to a professional advisor to be able to help you with that.
Yeah, I must stress that, I mean, there are over 40 different policies, cyber policies out there, and some of them are not worth the paper they're written on, frankly, and that's me talking as a professional. And often a lot of people say, I've got cyber insurance, it's thrown in free of charge. But if it's thrown in free of charge, you'll get what you pay for. Just check. If you're worried about it, ask an expert. We were nominated for Cyber Brokers of the Year last year in the UK. We do a lot of cyber insurance, and we do rely on an awful lot of people like Maximity, Simon and Tracy, to help talk us through some of the technicalities here. So we do understand cyber insurance. And we've seen some horrific claims over the years. I mean, a classic example in our industry is the USB scenario Simon mentioned about. I mean, imagine if on the car park outside your office, you find a set of keys with a USB stick attached to it, and you don't know whose keys they are. The natural human thing is to plug the USB into your computer to find out whose keys they are, to see if it's Matt's keys or Julie's keys or something like that. But of course, by doing that, they've just infected your computer. There's some very clever people out there, and these things are not uncommon. We had another one of our clients, their whole system was taken down because somebody hacked the Internet of Things device they had on their fish tank in the office. And they hacked into that, and then because of that, they got into their whole cyber system. These things happen. The common one we run across, of course, is where people's invoices get changed. And that's the first thing they find out is when they're expecting money and don't get it, or they've paid money and their suppliers don't get it. That's often when people discover for the first time something's gone wrong. And that's a classic example of the cyber fraud cover that you can buy as a business. Often once you've made a claim, insurance companies will insist that you do an element of two-factor authentication, like just ringing up and check and speaking to a contact at the supplier to check their bank details are correct before you make the payment. It takes 30 seconds and it can save you tens of thousands of pounds.
Right, I think we've got to the last question. So somebody says they store everything on the cloud, therefore they're safe, aren't they?
Sorry?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So actually, the cloud is a pretty safe environment. Depending on which cloud service you're using, etc. But all of the big ones, they're pretty safe environments. Again, I'd really encourage two-factor authentication because the biggest risk is actually people hacking into your account. But if you're using two-factor authentication, you've minimized that risk. If your passwords are good, you've minimized that risk. The one thing to be aware of is that if you synchronize your data from the cloud to your laptop or desktop, that is when you potentially have the risk of infecting a document. So the way that things like malware, etc. work is once they've infected your desktop, they are then on your network, and anything that they can basically connect to, have the authority to touch, that then gets spread out as a virus across your infrastructure. In the cloud, it can't do that, because that file in the cloud is only one file, and it can't go and permeate the rest of the cloud. But if you've synced it and synced lots of, then anything that is synced locally, then it will get swept up in your local attack, not your cloud attack. So just there are some, I know that's a bit of a complicated answer, but there are some subtleties there that you need to be aware of. Those malwares can only attack your laptop or desktop or and connected infrastructure. But if you're syncing those things to the cloud, then of course they will be infected. I think that a lot of cloud solutions also, particularly we do a lot of Microsoft stuff, but all of Microsoft stuff offers version history within SharePoint and Teams, so you can go and get previous versions of files. So if it's been infected, it's easier to access non-infected versions. But as we said earlier, if these infections have been there for 6 months, then that may not be of any help to you, because you're going back so long that it becomes irrelevant.
And just one further thing on that side, a few years ago, I asked a contact of mine, another cyber expert, what was the only safe computer? There must be a way to make a computer totally safe. And he said, yes, there was. He said, unplug it from everything, go to the garden, dig a 6-foot hole, drop it in there and bury it. That's the only way to make a computer safe, because any computer connected to the internet, by definition being connected to the big wide world, is vulnerable.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? Computers are meant for connectivity. That's their whole purpose in life. And clearly, of organisations of any size, shape, or form, we are trying to connect and work more effectively and efficiently together in everything we do. So, and it's like I said before, with all these things, we have to be aware. We can't be ignorant, because it's just like it is just like jumping in the sea when you know you can't swim. Don't do it, because the consequences aren't good. And I do think that it's not that hard to get your head around. I think as well for adults with children, don't bury your head in the sand with it. You can't afford to do that. As I said right at the beginning, children the age of 8 are being groomed. It's don't find yourself in that situation. It's not good.
That brings us nicely to the end. So thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Simon, Peter, and Julie as well. So if you have any questions after this, you want to run anything past us, then you know where we are. So we will be recording this session, so we'll make that available as well. So if you'd like to share it or just like another copy of it. And yes, say if you wanted to check any of your policies, or if you do have any requirements, to send them over to us, and we're more than happy to help, even if we haven't placed a policy. Okay, thank you.